Awesome. So in this video, I'll be talking to Kaitlyn. Kaitlyn currently works as a support engineer at GitLab. Hi, Kaitlyn, and can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been at GitLab for about 2 years as a support engineer. I was a support engineer before that at an email marketing company. And before that, I was doing Java development in the finance and insurance industry. Um, I have both ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, as well as a physical disability that occasionally gives me some cognitive difficulties. Um, I was diagnosed with both ADHD and autism spectrum disorder very young, which is rare for people assigned female at birth. But I didn't actually learn about them until college, as my parents didn't want to get me treatment for them. So I ended up having to figure all of this out on my own as an adult, and it took a long time. So, but I'm doing really well at GitLab, so I'll take it.
Awesome, awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well at GitLab, and of course, there's lots of different stories around treatment and things like that. So, yeah, would be fascinated to hear about a little bit about how that kind of progressed over time, especially over as an adult. How did that kind of progress?
So for me, my dad had ADHD when I was growing up, and he was on the, Ritalin, Concerta, Adderall type treatments, my whole life. And apparently I was diagnosed when I was very young. I was in elementary school, and I didn't even know that I had the diagnosis because I wasn't told at all. And so I, mostly did okay, breezed through school, and was actually placed in the school's gifted and talented program. So I had like academically excelled through school. So I guess my parents decided that I didn't need treatment. And it wasn't until high school and college where I started really struggling at keeping up with deadlines, getting my homework done, finishing things. And I had a couple of friends at the time in college who said, "You really seem like you have ADHD. Have you ever pursued an ADHD diagnosis?" And I went to my doctor at the time, who was just a general practitioner, and asked her, "How do I get this ball rolling?" And she said, "Oh, you've had the ADHD diagnosis since you were 8.
Wow.
Like, if you want to pursue treatment options, that's totally your choice. Sure, we can do that." So in many ways, I was luckier than a lot of people who were assigned female because I was able to get treatment relatively easily. And I was on stimulant medication through college and then dropped off when I moved away for my first job. And it wasn't until, I guess, last year or the year before, right around the time I started at GitLab, when I started pursuing medication again, and finding it really helpful still. So it's definitely, between that and obviously also therapy and, some life coaching, skills coaching type things. It's such an individual thing.
For sure, makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. And I guess, what are some of the day-to-day kind of challenges you might face in the workplace or in life that that presents itself? And then, how do you, or what accommodations does GitLab make to make those things easier?
So for me, ADHD and autism spectrum disorder are both primarily executive function disorders. So that's, things that affect your working memory, your problem solving skills, your time management, and of course your attention. And in a traditional office where, you're sitting in meetings, you're, sitting around other people, it can be very overwhelming. Just stimulants or wise, there's lots of noise, lots of light, lots of movement, distraction. And also, you have to sit down and focus for, set period of time, and there's tasks you have to do and ways you have to behave. And in addition, auditory processing issues are both really common in both those disorders too. So for me, day-to-day tasks like keeping track of which tickets I have answered in my support job, or keeping track of appointments and meetings in my calendar. If it's not in my calendar or my to-do list, I totally forget about it. If a meeting isn't captioned, if a training is only presented in video format or only in text format, those sorts of things can become very difficult for me. So the async work style is really helpful in that I can follow along with a meeting agenda. If I'm not feeling focused enough to attend live, I can, catch up on something later. I can have all of my expectations of me written down. I can use the tools that are familiar and comfortable for me without having to do one set way of a workflow. So for me, the flexibility has definitely been probably the biggest help.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, if you're having one of those days where you just feel super unfocused, to going into loads of synchronous meetings could be very, very difficult. So I can imagine having that option at least to be able to go back later is very valuable for someone that is neurodiverse. I know that with some neurodiversities, social situations can be difficult to navigate. From your experience, what can this look like, and how can managers and team members support team members who are neurodiverse?
So the biggest note for me on this sort of question is that every neurodiversity is different. If you've met one person with autism or ADHD, you've met one person with autism or ADHD. And it's always really important to ask specifically what challenges your direct report, your teammate, your coworker, whoever faces, and see what they need specifically. But that being said, masking is the term that we use for the way that most people with neurodiversities have grown up trying to behave like they're normal. It's something that we naturally learn by going to school, attending our first jobs, where you learn that you suddenly have to behave in a way that society expects you to. Most of us have grown up with report cards saying, obviously really knows the material but doesn't apply themselves, or has trouble sitting still, or doesn't interact well with others. And so we develop this mask, this persona of like our fake selves, where we pretend to take all of those behaviors and niceties and social situations that we have grown up learning were expected of us. And in many ways, this means that we can't be our true selves at work. So one of the biggest things that can help with this is psychological safety and patience. If someone says or does something that you don't expect, it's probably not intended as a slight. It's just everybody's a little different. We come from different cultures. We come from different backgrounds. We have different brains. So that really, really makes a difference to just have a little bit of empathy, especially for some neurodiversities. It's way more common for the diagnosis criteria to reflect that of white males. You think of the stereotypical ADHD kid and you think of a little boy running around because he's hyperactive. Yeah. So in many ways, even if, say a Black woman or someone who's transgender or someone who grew up, assigned female at birth says that they have ADHD, they may even show ADHD in a different way than you expect. So that empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And just having that psychological safety and empathy really allows you to just kind of sit with the way that you would react to certain things as well. So it allows you to really self-reflect and then move forward to constantly building that psychological safety, because it's an ongoing thing, isn't it?
For sure, for sure.
Thank you so much. And how could remote working improve some of these challenges with social situations and communication? But also, what new challenges could remote working present for somebody that is neurodiverse that team members should be aware of?
So remote work for me is definitely kind of a double-edged sword. In many ways, I'm more comfortable at home, with both having physical disabilities and neurodiversity. Being able to adjust my environment to the day-to-day needs that I have is really helpful. I'm in this chair today because that's what's comfortable, but maybe tomorrow I'll be laying on my bed. It really depends on the day. If I need to play music, if I need to take more breaks, I can do so, and it's totally fine. But I also have the problem of there's a lot of distraction. I might be working and think, oh, I'll take a break and do the dishes real quick, but now I'm suddenly cleaning the whole kitchen because I got off task, and now I'm not doing work things, I'm cleaning the kitchen. And so I really have to set timers and be aware of myself and my environment. So as long as I stay on top of those sorts of things, I'm totally okay, but it's definitely been a learning curve to adjust to working totally remotely. There's also, the benefit of async work being really helpful. If I need to read something written down, if I need to have my expectations and intentions put down really clearly, that's totally fine. I know exactly what my manager expects from me because she'll write it down in our one-on-one notes, and I can focus on accomplishing the week's tasks versus sitting in front of my computer and trying to work for 8 hours and failing because I can't just sit in front of a computer for 8 hours. Knowing what is expected and getting those things done and meeting the results has been really helpful.
Awesome.
Mm.
And I guess the final thing that I wanted to kind of cover is what's the one piece of advice that you'd give to managers and team members to be better colleagues to neurodiverse people?
So aside from, assuming positive intent, like I mentioned earlier, having that empathy, that understanding, asking what each individual needs, definitely speak up if you need help with something or if you notice something, and do so clearly and directly. Having that upfront honesty and addressing a problem head on rather than waiting until it becomes a huge issue can avoid a lot of anxiety, because a lot of people with neurodiversity have grown up hearing you need to work harder, you need to apply yourself more. And instead, if we just got the direction saying hey, let's do this instead of this, or is there some way that I can help you, it would make a huge difference to get that upfront and directly when it's still a small problem.
For sure. Thank you so much, Kaitlyn, for sharing and participating in this. I know it's going to help a lot of other team members learn about neurodiversity through your experiences and your tips. So I'm really, really grateful for you taking up this opportunity. Any final thoughts before we log off?
Not really. This was a lot of fun. Everyone's always willing to, come share tips. I love sharing tips. I'm always willing to talk with people if they want some more advice or want to come up with some ideas.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Kaitlyn. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right.